And let's say hello again. So today we're going to start with a, today we have a full 4 hours, which is going to be fun. So we are going to start with talking with Hayexine about the Manila share transfer between projects, and then continue into a QA update for all the stuff that we're doing in Manila. And that would include the interop stuff, the SR back stuff, a bunch of other things. And then we should be continuing into the metadata spec, speaking with Ashley, and later the CephFS updates, speaking with Victoria and friends. And finally, we'll conclude with talking about the edge requirements for Manila. Um, so yeah, so we have a packed day today. So hopefully we can get through all of it. And feel free to prompt me on the side if you want, because it is a full 4 hours, so we should be taking as much breaks as possible. But I'm pretty bad at tracking that. But if I forget, please let me know. Um, and at some point today, I'd also, I can pause recording, and I wanted to try to get some photographs of everybody that's here to share with the foundation. So let's do that as well. All right. So I can get the bot prompted, and we can hand this over to Hayexine.
Uh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Hayexine.
I got this. I got this idea is from Sender. I think the uh, I think transfer between project is very useful, not only for Sender but for Manila. So uh, uh, this is the idea to um, to make a transfer available for Manila. So I write this topic here. We can discuss about it. Uh, uh, um, the, uh, this feature include transfer create, transfer accept, transfer delete. Uh, uh, this feature uh, will allow a share to transfer uh, uh, your between project. For example, project A transfer to project B. Uh, uh, this will help users to to work together for a same work. I think uh, uh, a share in project uh, 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 after a share transferred uh, include its share instance and share snapshots. Uh, uh, and if a share with a share network DHSS equal true, in this mode will not support the in the mode share have a share network because a share not because a share uh, to one project and a share net a shared network maybe have some instance. Uh, those instances belong to different share. Uh, so if so if a share instance transfer go away, it cannot take a share network transfer to uh, uh, what I want to say is right here. Uh, if snapshot of source share not in available schedule, this will lead to accept the transfer field, then roll back to uh, uh, the rollback the schedule. Then we also consider the share type of share. If the share type is not public, or if the transfer accept project cannot access the share type, then will accept field. The one share transfer creates the schedule of share will be waiting transfer. If share accepted by another project, the share completed transfer and roll back to available. If the share keep in waiting transfer schedule more than 1 hour, for the security, we will automatic transfer to then it will roll back to available. 这个 more than one new have this feature. It's sender want to do this. That's all I said. Okay,
Uh,
that's all. My English is poor.
no, thank you. This is, I mean, thanks for introducing the topic. So we can start typing here uh, if we have feedback, and we can discuss it that way.
We should kill. Uh, yes. I forgot to write here. When a project to accept the share, um, the accept project will check its quarter. I will not work in DHS 等于equal true. I don't think work as 等于 true. Equal true. What if about share group? That's a question. I need to think more clear. Share group. Mm. Yes, need to think about this. Will transfer be acted by a shared driver? If CephFS driver stores project ID as metadata, I think this is necessary to change in the driver. If any snapshot of source, well, later field. Transfer 第二阶段 right, if so, right, if so, shouldn't we try to fill earlier? I think instead we should. About the snapshot still. Yes, yeah, we can check the schedule of snapshot in the API to make sure it to make sure can accept successful. we introduce a way to put a shared network in maintained state. We could probably think of a similar approach here. An admin transfer accept can return failure until all shares failed until all shares on the network are hmm? Tran shares make it. Uh, uh, once all the shares transfer, once all the shares switch.
Yeah, I think we should take some time to think about that.
Mm. That means we make a new feature to transfer shared network.
Yes.
If we transfer the shared network, that means we transfer all the shares on this shared network one by one until all the shares has transferred. Then the shared network transfer transfer complete. Is that
Yeah,
mean?
yes and no. I was still thinking we begin with transferring the share network and then individually transfer every share that's under it. It's still two stages. So first the share network, then each of the shares under it, um, how many ever that is.
Yeah. Mm, I but but I think this we can consider transfer share network be another feature. Uh, not only this feature only include a share. Uh, if we want to transfer share network, we can consider this as another feature different from for servers and try to project now, so Gerald may have nothing to do here. If we have more. Space. Then a native transfer for all shares under it. Alert here is to我去，我的这个怎么刷不出来呀？So many. Servers and users. ，alert here. Transfer for all share data. Next step, all share in one go. This need application so we can consider all cases thoroughly. Break out. Hmm, not everything need to be done in one release. We can plug this feature. Yes, yes. I think we can do the HSS equal false in the first, and then the second we do DHSS 等于 equal true. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I mean, there could be some stuff. I mean, thanks for introducing the topic. I'm pretty sure folks will want to take some time to read what Cinder has done. There are some links out here. Uh, I couldn't find their latest user guide. I I mean, it's not something Google could help me right away, but if somebody can find the latest user guide around that, please add that link. And then there is the volume API that's associated with it. Um, so maybe you can see some of the things that they're considering. So that will be a good start, as well as, of course, I mean, Hyaxine, if you have the spec, we can actually, put down all of these details.
yeah, I will write back it later.
Awesome.
Mm. There is so many things need to consider.
Right. Any questions or any other discussion items anyone wants to bring up? I suppose that's a no. If you have any, please type them out as well. All right. If not, thanks, Hyaxine. Thanks for working on this. Thanks for thinking about it. I do think this is quite a useful feature, especially in multi-tenant, large multi-tenant environments. So I'm excited to start thinking about it. Although yes, all of these caveats that we were brainstorming right now. So let's do some more of that on the specification, um, and we'll take it from there. Awesome. All right. So I think we're doing pretty good on time so far. Um, let's move on to the next topic. Uh, and this is going to be a feature. Uh, So Vida and I can both take this stuff, but I'll play second fiddle. So let's. Yeah, I mean, Vida, do you have a presentation for us to begin with? Let's start going down with the same order, I guess.
I got them. Yeah,
Hi.
hey, everybody. I do have a presentation. I can share my screen.
Yes, you should be able to.
Mm-hmm.
I can stop, I think. Hold on
Yeah,
a sec.
it would help. Thank you.
Oh, damn. Weird. How does one stop share? Oh, there. Okay. There's a really tiny button that says stop share. All right. It's yours now, Vida.
So, do you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So, yes, we just wanted to have the interop working group. We just got this slot with go over what interoperability testing is, what it involves, what are the goals, how a project team can introduce interoperability testing into the suite, and the Manila, how it applies to Manila. Also give you some ideas and show examples of how we did this. We started this effort back in the previous cycle in actually Wallaby, and I will share all that information with you. And following the presentation, I will show you some examples of the code and go through the process sort of in action so you can get an idea how it's done. And hoping that in this short presentation, we can get some enough information conveyed that folks can start thinking about this and where do we go from here, pretty much. So that said, why? So the idea is when we develop applications or services, there is a need for this pretty much early on as vendors were developing applications and they integrated it into the OpenStack, started running into some issues playing with other applications and services. And you may have actually run into this with your code when everything looks good on your sandbox, but when you integrate it with other people's code or other vendors, errors. So that was a preface with the interoperability work group. The actually formed a long time ago, as far back as 2004. And how they approached this to solve this problem was to create these guidelines. So the guidelines are what we what we define as pretty much like test criterias for interoperability, and they are based on the capabilities that implementing. For example, if you have an API and you want to use it in this other to have confidence that this API is going to play well and it's not going to issues. So it's the and I briefly mentioned these guidelines. These are really tests, and the committee, the working group, worked with the community to create these guidelines, and you can see these what criteria is to actually be designated interoperability level with other OpenStack components. So just show real quick here's the um, the page and look at the types of vulnerability that vendors for the qualification powered its designation, which is, and you know, I will share these links with you, the recording. Okay. Gotham, are we back on?
Yeah, I think I had a disconnect. Sorry about that.
No problem. So, and then the next level, which is OpenStack compatible. So it's OpenStack powered and compatible. This means that the piece of hardware actually interacts. It can interact with OpenStack powered services. So this is just a high level explanation of what it is that the vendors look to qualify for or get certified for. And so back to the guidelines. The next slide actually shares information about each one of these criteria, but mainly the testing and the guidelines are around how widely used is this API. For example, like show proven usage. Basically, you want to make sure that this API has been widely used, has enough exposure, used by tools and clients. And the next tier would be, does it take a system view? For example, is it atomic? Is there any dependencies with other functionality? Is it foundational? Meaning, is it a basic functionality? Does it align with technical direction with this quadrant, for example? Does it align with technical direction of community? Is there a plan to have a future direction for this API? Is it complete, or is it reliable and stable? And the next criteria is, does it play with others? In other words, when is it discoverable, and is it well documented? And was it a feature that was in the RAS release? Again, going back to the idea of how widely it's been used. So in the next slide, each one of these criteria are kind of described in detail. Widely deployed, used with external tools. Is it stable? And so forth. So which one of the projects have already been granted interoperability status? So this list, as you see, it kind of follows the legacy OpenStack division of having core versus non-core guidelines or components. And it's basically classification. It doesn't really mean that any of these components or projects are any less interoperable. All of the criteria for interoperability testing and the guidelines are the same. They all have to go through the same criteria. And here, as you see, shared file system, Manila. We add this as an add-on guideline cycle. And here's another example, proposed additions. So for the next cycle, there was a proposal to add Octavia and Barbican for interoperability. So some of the highlights, how does it actually work? As I said, the guidelines are a group of tests, and the vendors and the project teams come up with a proposal and a draft of what APIs actually do qualify and meet the criteria that we just talked about. And they come up with a proposed guideline. it's all basically tracked and submitted and reviewed through Garrett. And once a proposal has been reviewed and it looks good, it actually does have to be considered and reviewed by the board. The interrupt. Yeah, sorry about that. An update came in. The interrupt working group, the committee has to review every one of the guideline proposals and make a vote on it. So the testing is based on this tool. It's called RefStack. And I will go through that in the next slide a little bit. But once a guideline is approved and the vendor will run the tests and submit the tests, and they complete the process, the certified vendors will be showcased in this foundation, which is called Marketplace. So the OpenStack Foundation has this marketplace which shows who or which vendors have what level certification, interoperability certification, what tests were run, when they were run, and which releases they were run. And then we'll just briefly talk about the microversion API and how it's basically addressed or dealt with. So here's the example of, in this page, OpenStack Marketplace. You can see that some of the vendors, you can navigate through here and see some of the vendors that were certified and what their level of certification is. For example, interesting. Morantis has OpenStack powered, and it was tested, and you can look at the details of what exactly was included in this certification, in this designation. All of that details are available under the particular vendor. So you can see the different releases, what the coverage was, and so forth. And also you can look for interoperability with public clouds and determine if this particular API or service, the OpenStack service, with clouds or which ones it has been approved or certified with. And here's a nice map here that goes over that. A little brief sort of overview of RefStack, since this is the foundation, the tool that is responsible, or all the testing is conducted with. So there kind of is just a tool which is a wrapper for Tempest. And the idea here is that the vendors and the guideline, when they come up with a proposed guideline, the tests that they propose are foundational. They're like a minimal set of functionality, and don't require developing new tests. They should be able to use some of their existing Tempest tests and use it for interoperability. So let's see. And here you can see actually the marketing programs. We have the shared file system here listed, and some more information on RefStack. If anybody wants to look it up, it's in this page about RefStack. You can go over it. It's a wrapper for Tempest, and then how to install it, how to run the tests, how to submit the results, and so process 5. Okay, so As I mentioned, we already have, there is an add-on for Manila shared file system that we submitted. So it's not a new add-on, but I just wanted to share, there was a nice slide that Gotham had done on this one. I included it. So there's a process, how do the add-on guidelines get basically created, and what is the process, how do projects choose the API tests and so forth. So first thing that community does is they come up with a list of APIs, which we already did. They're foundational basic tests that verify capabilities, basic capabilities. For example, share creation is considered a capability, like share, create, share, delete, share, create snapshot, and so forth. And then come up with a list of APIs and come up with the tests, Tempest tests, to verify these APIs. And then there's this scoring criteria uses to the API. And the scoring criteria, let me see if I can find, yeah, there we go. Defined in detail. There's really, we haven't used this process very tightly, but there's a method to determine based on the and for each test. And these are how they keep track of any one of those capabilities and the criteria that we talked about, like, for example, widely distributed. These are deployed, atomic, is it documented, is it discoverable? So all the capabilities that we talked about in the previous slide are have a score here, and total will be decided based on all the tests that are conducted, and the total would determine if that particular criteria was met or not, guideline criteria was met or not. So that's the scoring criteria. In Wallaby, we submitted a share file system. They basically submitted in form of a JSON file, and I will show you an example of that. If you go to the interop repo, under guidelines, you'll see the shared file system 2020, this is for the Wallaby. This is submitted, and the next cycle be for basically proposed, they will be laid next, which is for the cycle, and they have to be approved and so forth. But the Wallaby cycle 1, I'll show you here how the tests are defined. In this file, in the JSON file, we basically defined which tests we wanted to include. For example, share, create, delete, get, list, update, extend, shrink, so forth. So these are the tests that when every time that the tests are run, RefStack tests are run, these tests will be executed and the results will be reported to the RefStack server. I will show you an example of, for example, a little detail of how those scoring comes into play to determine the API, the results, and determine if that particular test has reached the criteria, the goal. As you can see up here, there are, here it is, cut off each criteria they have, and there is a weight. And based on this information, that scoring is defined. So for the shared get one, for example, or any of those tests for that matter, you can see that the different achievements the different criteria that we talked about, the capabilities are listed here for this particular test, API test. There is a one of the other criteria for choosing the API test was that there is no need for having any special privilege for running these tests. So set the admin to false. And then there's a description of the test and so on and so forth. And there's a idempotent ID, which is unique for Tempest tests. That this shows that we're using this Tempest test particularly for this guideline entry. So, and as you saw in the code, this is what we are going to be designated as for the component, which is OS-powered shared file system. And let's see. So there's a test name, there's a test UID, everything is unique. And okay, let's see if we want to share this. Yep, we already shared that. All right, last but not least here, there is no specific testing for microversions, but we did list the different version ranges for different teams and projects here. With the glance, I think the idea was that during the presentation, we would try to gain if there was any range for qualifying it. So the min and the max ranges are just listed here for project. And then finally, what to do has and maybe take a look at some of the tests. The next and I'm this is enough to participate maybe the tests of what are of our guidelines and if it can be improved or is any functionality with it. So open to any feedback on that. In case you think about this and you are asked to think about, okay, how can we expand? Is there any other functionality that is not covered yet? And we want to include that in. Tool created, and this basically goes off. It's a shell-based tool, and it goes off and looks at tasks that are not in interop already. And for example, this is the list of Manila tests that are not included in interoperability for share file system guideline and could potentially be evaluated and added guideline submission for the ad community. So with that said, I know there's a lot of information, but if there's any questions for me, just and I'll be glad if I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through the whole process of how this stuff is thought about, Vida. So the AIs from our end would be to take a look at the tests that the tooling has generated or identified as potential tests for interop. Is that the thing?
Correct. Right. Exactly.
Okay. So if you can add a link you might have already done this, but if it's missing, maybe that's we can add a link over there, and maybe we can discuss this in during a regular weekly meeting. Have folks, review those, take the time to review those between now and maybe the next team meeting, and bring this back up. What do you think?
Sure, sounds good. I'm just gonna add the link in here. Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Also link your presentation as well in case they want to revisit it.
Sure, will do.
Thanks. So do we want to go to the next topic within that, which is, I don't think there's much to report, and we can move the SR back stuff to the SR back slot that is there tomorrow. And we can move on to the next one, which is the plugin enhancements.
Sounds good, Gotham.
All right. So I think this is just a call out on a couple of things that were starting to take shape last cycle. So let me share my screen again. So there are a couple of patches here. I think, oh, this one's merged. Oh, this one's merged as well. I am assuming we were planning to talk about this when
Yeah.
it loads. Yep.
We started in the previous discussions in the previous PTG and wanted to bring it to the community's attention.
Awesome. All right. Currently failing CI, but I mean, this looks like a really huge change, but it is going to simplify lives of folks or automation that is trying to figure out, configuring our Tempest tests per features. And it's going to try to make it aligned to the way the rest of Tempest testing works, which is there is a features section. And in this case, we can call it share feature enabled. And we dump a list of the capabilities that we want to test under it as configuration options. And this kind of this eliminates the need for capability flags and flags that are meant to run specific tests. So for example, running snapshot tests, running revert to snapshot tests, we actually have versions of where the capability is set in conjunction with this enable or disable sort of flag as well. And that has been quite confusing, and we've also implemented this across the test in quite an inconsistent manner, because some of the times we just ignore this capability and just use the capability as true because somebody has enabled snapshot tests, which logically thinking must make sense, right? Like, because if you want to run snapshot tests, then we better have that capability. And this capability matters because we are trying to create share types with it. And at some point, we pivoted to making sure that share types that are created for the tests only ask for capabilities that they care about testing. So technically, if there are no snapshots being created, the share type that's created for that test doesn't need snapshot capability. So that's currently the manner of the test writing as well as throughout. So that's what this refactor is going to be in line with. So it's still a work in progress. As you can see, Laurent's like picking out specific things and trying to like make changes at the same time. I suppose the biggest thing over here is how do you handle deprecations? We might actually be lucky because this is a branchless project that we might just have to keep the deprecation around for a couple of tags that we produce, but we'll see. Just a call out on that. So if you have some early feedback for Laurent, it'll help because we are looking to get this into the yoga cycle. All right. The next thing, and it's another thing which is again Sorry.
If I may.
Yep. Hi,
Hi, sorry for hijacking the meeting. I was just looking at that review. I added a comment. So, because in Cinder we have a problem right now when we test multiple backends, which is not letting you do too much in the gates here on opendev.org.
Mhm.
Also, Manila supports multiple backends, and we have the problem that sometimes we have only enable backends on all of them. And right now, Tempest doesn't, the ways the configuration variables are in Tempest, they don't allow us to say, okay, test these things only on this backend, but not on the other. Some guidance from QE people, okay, in this case, just don't enable the feature at all. As you are going to write those those variables from scratch, I suggest you to make sure you find a way to define, to either make sure that you can test by disabling the feature altogether, so you know that you are aware of that, and if you have multiple backends and some of them don't support some features, you know that you need to disable the feature. But that means you cannot test it on the backends which support it unless you reconfigure to disable the other backends, or you architect the variables in a way that you can say, okay, just test this feature, run this test on those specific backends.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if it's clear, but yeah, you can do it from scratch. It's probably better.
No, you're right. I think we already ran into this because downstream, I think Leron was trying to test with two different backends, and he had the same issue, and he had to twiddle some things. So I think for the multi-backend tests, we've kind of isolated those, and funnily enough, I think every time you run something, it is multi-backend. There could be multiple pools, there could be multiple backends, but mostly you'd expect them all to be of the same type, I think, which is kind of where we had the bugs. Because the moment you started testing two different backends, let's say a NetApp and a CephFS, then I mean our tests were trying to do the wrong thing. So I think all of the fixes were isolated to that file which tests multiple heterogeneous backends of sorts. And it kind of tries to abstract away the capabilities and not test any of the optional capabilities in that suite. That's how we've not run into the other capabilities that you're calling out. So I think, I mean, if we have a capability that we want to test, and we should keep in mind that not all backends that are configured will have that capability. Then if the test can work around that, and they're intending to test the Manila API and not really the specific backend behavior, that's still fine, I think.
Okay, I mean, up to you. I just wanted to raise the flag in case. Okay.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That helps. Awesome. So thanks for leaving a comment as well. We'll follow up on the code review for that one. About scenario testing in the third-party CI. So we hit an issue this cycle with the Pure backend, Pure Storage backend, and that was specifically around scenario tests. There was a change in dev stack with respect to OVN that disabled the ability to talk to an external network from within tenant VMs. So that surfaced the idea that many of the CI systems that are running against Manila are still not running the scenario tests. And it was, I wanted to call out that, I mean, it is definitely good on the driver maintainer's part to make sure that the new driver is running with scenario tests. So here's a further call out to any driver maintainers in the call and those watching later that don't try to reduce the number of tests. We've greatly improved the scenario testing over the past releases. It is not as problematic as it used to be. It's not no longer just built for the reference drivers. We, for instance, downstream, Vida, Liron, and a lot of other folks have played with the scenario tests and have tested with CephFS native, CephFS NFS, NetApp, and so on. So if there are some issues, we can certainly fix them, but do enable them in your CI systems. And I mean, it isn't something we want to enforce, like, we don't want to like hold a stick, but in case there's some change that's coming into your driver and we want to make sure that this doesn't break your driver, so this is going to be a really good way to catch those failures. So it's in the vendor's interest to make sure that these tests are running at all times in the CI. And if there are issues, we'd like to know, like if there are bugs in the scenario tests themselves. Anything further to add, Vida?
No, that covered it well. Thank you.
Awesome. Any questions, any comments about the testing? Topic?
Yeah, so list of templates that aren't tracked, is there a criteria that has to be met in order to get them tracked?
Yeah, Ashley. So that process that we mentioned, how to choose the APIs based on the scoring and also the quadrant. That should be the starting point. But if there's any questions, we can always have a follow-up discussion on it.
Great, thanks.
All right. So we meant to take a 10-minute break. We're running about 5 minutes late. So let's still take that 10-minute break because folks have been at their computers for quite a bit. So when we return from the 10-minute break, I did want to adjust the schedule a little bit. I know some more folks have joined us. And Ashley, this is a question to you. Is it okay if we move the CephFS topics to right after the break, Ashley and Victoria, and then do the metadata discussion after?
Sure, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Awesome. How does that sound, Victoria?
Sounds perfect to me. Thanks.
Awesome. Definitely don't want to keep folks from the other sessions that they're planning. So I'm going to move this chunk around when we get back from the break. We'll get starting. We'll get talking about CephFS. So here's the 10-minute break. I'm going to pause the recording and start a timer.
Okay.
So let's get back and resume with this talk about CephFS with Victoria. Victoria, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to open any Etherpad for you or something?
Hey everyone. Hey Gautam. Yes, let me share an Etherpad link with you, and you can share that from your screen directly.
Okay.
Would you mind pasting a link to the Etherpad in the chat, please?
Of course, you got it. So that's the Etherpad that we're going to be using for this discussion. And actually, I think we can include the next one on the same Etherpad as well, since it's the same topic. So,
Yep.
So that Etherpad has a few notes that we have been gathering around this topic, which is CephFS and FS driver deployed with CephADM. I know we have John and we have Francesco who have been working on the Triplo side of this feature. And we also have Romana on the CephFS team that has been working on the Ceph side of things. So I was wondering, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Romana, would you mind, would you prefer to share an update on how things are on the Ceph side, and then we can move to what changes do we need on the CephFS and FS driver on the Manila side? If not, I can start right away from that part.
Victoria, it will be helpful if you give more context, and I can pick up specific topics in CephFS and Ceph
Okay.
in general that
All right,
would be
perfect.
worth mentioning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so this proposal is to use a tool that has been developed by the Ceph community, which is CephADM, in order to deploy Ceph environments. CephADM now has has a plugin that allows you to deploy NFS, and basically all the deployment is being managed by Ceph directly. And well, that's definitely more cleaner than how we have been doing things right now. The thing is that with this new way of deploying things, basically we are relying on some configuration options and some decisions that have been taken by the Ceph team. And there are several changes that are going to affect us, and that actually require us to update the driver to reflect those needs. On the SFR, I just pointed out to a few of them, including how we are handling the export IDs, divas, and watch URL mechanisms, which, well, we can quickly cover in a bit. And well, which is the idea of the implementation for this, which is on the bottom of this etcpad. Perhaps the most complicated part is about divas mechanism. Right now we are using divas, which is a system local IPC mechanism for system management and peer-to-peer application communication. Every time we create a share, we add an export, and basically we use the diva service in order to communicate with Ganesha to create that export. We do the same for removing exports or updating export. That's what we currently have in our driver. And the watch URL mechanism is a new mechanism that is being used by CephADM. Basically, what we have in this way is we have an object, a Rados object, and the Ganesha is going to be watching that object for any notification about changes on the driver, sorry, on the exports. For that, maybe it's like the implementation is on the Ganesha side, and it's easier to consume since basically it's a CLI command that we issue. It is not for debus, we need to kind of build up the message that we're going to send on the debus bus, but still the way it operates being asynchronous kind of change a bit on how we do things right now at Manila. So that would be the main difference. And yeah, for that we have seen requiring a change on the CephFS interface to complete the mapping between the two of them. So that's kind of summary. I don't know if would you like more details, or maybe from Anna, it's a good opportunity for you to chime in and share about those.
Yeah, I can talk about the CephADM updates.
Okay.
So the plan is to use CephADM tool to deploy NFS Ganesha and also manage the lifecycle of NFS Ganesha. Make sure the HA works, the failover works. So the deployment was previously taken care. Deployment of NFS Ganesha is currently taken care by O, and the HA is taken care by the pacemaker CoroSync infrastructure that is there in OpenStack. So to simplify this, the Ceph community has decided that CephADM is the tool to go to simplify the deployment and management of the Ganesha server lifecycle and its HA. Um, the deployment of NFS Ganesha and the exports management is nearly done. What is still what is until recently been missing is the HA work, which is the challenging work. And there have been recent work in CephADM to make sure that the failover of Ganesha works in high availability uh, feature works. So I think the plan is the Ganesha deployment, server deployment and the export management is already available in Pacific, though the CLI to do this has been changing. The HA work is, I think the plan is to make it stable for Quincy, Ceph Quincy. So that's something to keep in mind and figure out when we'd like the NFS driver to switch over to using CephADM to deploy and manage Ganesha, because I don't think it makes sense until the high availability part of Ganesha service is nailed down. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks, Romana. All right, so I guess that we probably can jump directly to the proposal. We have been brainstorming about different sides of this, because implementation requires changing a bit on how we are doing things. Like it actually it's a big refactor on the current driver, including changing how we are calling for the export, addition, removal, and updates, plus how we are communicating with Ganesha, plus some assumptions we are doing with the export IDs. So it's a big change on the driver. Apart from that, we are also thinking about the upgrade path, since it may be a difference between what we are currently doing right now on the store to how the exports are going to look in the new implementation. And therefore we are planning, we are thinking on how we can do an upgrade path that is hard to actually do an update and make sure that everything is in place after that. The plan is to start by looking into consuming wait for the updates to be on the Ceph side and start migrating the different commands. We are going to do that gradually. From the upgrade path, I don't know which tools are being used to deploy Manila apart from Tripolo that may need some updates for this one to work as expected. So maybe we can gather some feedback for today on the front.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us to share what the Tripolo piece is, but I mean, we know folks in the Cola community or the OpenStack Charms folks that work on Ubuntu and the Debian packaging guys that have started exploring the NFS Ganesha deployment. So they don't use All of them, I'm not sure, are using Ceph Ansible. Some of them are doing something completely different for the NFS deployment. So it's probably, I mean, we can do a survey perhaps with the mailing list, but we should put out a thing about what we are doing with OOO, if it probably helps people align. And that aspect would help, align the driver as well, because you don't want to be maintaining a compatibility layer for CephAdam deployed Ganesha instances versus the things that are not deployed by Ganesha. And I think the biggest problem about that is the driver has to care who deploys this. And the reason is because the NFS APIs that we want to use are going to only work when it is a CephAdam deployed Ganesha. It's not going to work with if you were to just stand up NFS Ganesha on your own, and it's not managed by the CephAdam.
My impression is that Paula and OpenStack Ansible right now, the approach taken has been to stay away from Pacemaker and try to implement their own HA proxy in front of NFS Ganesha. And really, so they haven't really succeeded yet with HA because it's not going to work until Ganesha changes to be able to work that way. You can't just stick an HA proxy in front of multiple Ganesha daemons prior to this new work. And even when you do, you need a mechanism to restart Ganeshas when they fail beyond systemd. So a mechanism if the node fails. And that's part of what's being worked on to make it recover quickly right now. The failover doesn't work by having multiple Ganeshas and having an ingress in front of them and anyone can stand in for another. It works by having one or more Ganeshas with an ingress in front of them where you can recover that one quickly enough.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in the past, we've kind of shied away from adding any more documentation for this. But this effort, I think, is good because finally we're able to have a well-defined HA that we're willing to support, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not very familiar with how other installers are deploying Ceph, or well, in this case, CephFS. I'm thinking about Cola and well, I know that a lot of people in the community use Ceph Ansible. I assuming that in the case of Ansible, they are deploying the old way, not using CephADM, but I'm not entirely sure.
I think we're pioneering with CephAdam here.
Okay. All right, do we want to cover the changes that are going to be introduced in CephOO?
Yes, let's go ahead, I guess.
All right, awesome. So there's actually a spec on the CephOO side is linked on the Etherpad, and Francesco and John have been working on this one mainly, and Julie on the call as well. I don't know, guys, if you want to cover about this specifically.
Yeah, so the spec is there. We have a good level of detail at this point. So I'm trying to reach everyone to understand if we need to add more things, or we are good, or actually we understand which is the plan at this point. Because in my understanding, using CephADM prevents us to be flexible and in configuring Ganesha in terms of the configuration file, which means, and there is also a problem in the exports creation or update, because we have two different tools interacting with the same instance. So at this point, if we want to go with CephADM deployed Ganesha, we need to change the driver and support a different mechanism rather than TBUS and what is used today. And WatchURL seems to be first good candidate to run this new approach. So this we tried to cover this and try to put this dependency on what is needed in OOO and what we need to do in Manila in terms of drive configuration and changes. So we will at this point use the CLI that is provided for creating and updating exports, and we have a way to asynchronously get when the export is created or the export. At this point, this is the first step, I guess, to move to the CephADM deployed Ganesha. And this is covered in terms of steps in this spec. The second aspect of this conversation is related to the architectural impact of this change, because having Ganesha deployed by CephADM means that we can use the ingress. In OOO we can get rid of PCS, but I think it's pretty much similar for the other project that start using CephADM to deploy their Ceph cluster. So as long as the failover, the HA, the ingress HA works, I think project can start moving to this approach because it's natively supported by Ceph. We can probably cover the upgrade path. It's the most interesting aspect of this spec, because we know that for existing environment, migrating from a OOO managed Ganesha or a Ceph Ansible managed Ganesha to a CephADM 1 means we need to change the virtual IP from a networking point of view. Would this generate disruption in the cluster, the workload? And I think at some point we need to provide a workflow, a valid workflow, well-defined workflow to migrate for customers. So yeah, the first thing I tried to capture in the spec is related to the fact that when we are going to deploy Ganesha using CephADM, we don't have the same Ansible flexibility to make to change the configuration, and this brings the change in the driver. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that part I think Victoria covered, so it's going to be part of our yoga deliverables that we are looking to switch over the mechanism that, I mean, completely stop using dbus. And
and this brings other kind of things like the synchronous vs asynchronous when you create an export using the CLI, the Ceph NFS export CLI, and you need to make sure that the export is created, and you need a notification regarding the action that you run against the cluster, then the Ganesha instance. So this is another thing which is really important. From a deployment point of view, I think assuming that this part is pretty much well defined, on the OOO side, we can probably talk more about two things: the upgrades, of course, and the scenarios that are going to change in terms of support. Because using the ingress, using an ingress for external Ceph clusters, we no longer need to deploy Ganesha within the controller nodes. We can just use the ingress with all the virtual IP and HA that brings to deploy Ganesha externally. So it's managed by CephADM, and we are no longer able to deploy a standalone Ganesha instance within the controllers, which is fine. I think it's well accepted. The problem that we need to solve is the upgrade workflow for an existing cluster where you are supposed to enable your new Ganesha instance on the other side and then destroy what you have on the OpenStack controllers. And then you need to preserve the virtual IP and the workload as soon. But we discussed yesterday, we had a comment yesterday from Tom regarding the disruption of the cluster in the 000 section. I think this is well known, and we need to provide playbooks to migrate, but I'm not sure we can avoid this kind of disruption when we migrate from an existing environment to a new one.
Yeah. I see Ramona recently added a note to the spec saying that. So we'll just be very explicit in the spec. Unfortunately, there will be a service interruption.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe this is not another end user impact. It's this can go within the upgrade impact, where we are trying to capture which is the real flow, which is do not touch Ganesha when the fast forward upgrade is run, and then provide playbooks or a different step where you can do this kind of migration. Because Ganesha is managed by 000 and not from CephADM, so we need to go smoothly with the upgrade and then migrate this part in a separated step.
I just want to make sure I understood that part, because we have steps in 000 where we upgrade them, to the next version. But I thought that we were going to do this migration separately from upgrades, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So the idea is that before you move maybe to the Z release, right, you would need to be on the new way that Ganesha is managed. Right. So if you're running yoga, that's fine. You can have the old way and the new way. And then when you do the upgrade, prior to upgrading to Z, you'd want to switch to the new method where it's CephADM managed.
Yeah. Do you have additional questions on specific section of the spec? We want to dig more, I don't know, maybe.
So I guess that's the last thing that you said. I mean, when you are upgrading to the Z release, let's say, you want to make sure that that they have, removed the NFS Ganesha that is managed by Pacemaker. Did I break up over there? Sorry.
Yeah, there are different there is the constraint today between the virtual IP and the systemd Ganesha unit. Ceph Ansible is used to create the systemd unit, but then it's skipped the old part where you run the demo reload, the run the systemd unit. All this part is skipped, and it's managed by PCS because of this kind of constraints. So we want to make sure that not during the upgrade, but after the upgrade, when we provide this new workflow, we're going to destroy this kind of constraint before moving the virtual IP or the workload on the other instance. So yeah, this is part of the workflow we're trying to define.
That makes sense. So is there a way, I don't know, this might be a noob question. Is there a way to like prevent the deployer from upgrading without having run this migration playbook so that, you know, they know, I mean, we know that they've signed up for the disruption?
Yeah, we've done stuff like that before.
Okay.
Like, oh, you're
Yeah.
still running Ceph.
Makes sense. That kind of makes sense for the upgrade piece with respect to OOO, but with respect to the driver itself and Manila, you know, and consumers outside of OOO, I mean, as we discussed, switching over to the NFS APIs will be something that we can't do, you know, straight away. I mean, specifically because of the fact that we don't know whether something is managed by CephAdam or not, which is the prereq for doing that. So that's the piece we're still hashing out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we need
this
more
is
feedback
this
for that.
assumption. Go ahead, sorry.
No, it's just only that like need more feedback to understand how other users are deploying Manila CephFS NFS with Ceph and try to understand if they are using the manager interface for NFS or what they are using. As far as I understand right now, the two interfaces can coexist. Like you can have Manila using Divas and issuing the calls for exports, things working as expected, and at the same time have Ceph with the NFS interface deployed. But I don't know if somebody wants to use the interface and stop using Divas, how does it look for them? If it comes out of something that they need to deploy explicitly.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'll add some notes on this. After, I guess. So in this thing, we've started exploring the aspect that we have Ganesha as a driver mixin right now. So we might introduce a new driver mixin, which will you know use the NFS export, create, delete commands, and this would allow deployers to use the dbus interface versus the NFS commands. We think that should be sufficient, at least in theory, but something that we're exploring for this. And the other thing with that is, I mean, the driver interface mixin is again something that's making up these export ID limitations. So right now, I mean, we had a simple configuration where somebody would tell us, okay, this is what the export counter should start at, and by default that is 1,000. Just preserving the first 1,000 exports for something that's not Manila. But in case of the NFS APIs, as far as I understand it, Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't need to worry about the export, figuring out the export IDs, right? This is something that the Ceph NFS APIs will take care of.
Yeah, that's correct. Right now, we are managing the export IDs within the NFS Ganesha driver. And we are calculating which is the next export ID by the number that we store in the Rados object. And we start from 1,000. That's not configurable. That's something that is on the code. Yep. So I was wondering if, apart from the refactor that we want, that we need to do in order to start using watch URLs, if we actually want to change that as well, or if we want to stick with,
So I may be being too simple-minded about this, but I think this export is need to concern ourselves with if we're using the CephFS orchestrator APIs.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the driver's concern. I guess my question was about, like, has the Ceph site considered the aspect that there's going to be existing exports with some export IDs, and it knows exactly how to figure out what is the next export ID that it can come up with, or we had that old bug about filling up the holes in the export IDs as exports appear and disappear, kind of thing. So it knows all of that. All of that intelligence is already added to the NFS side.
Yeah, I mean, Ceph, the NFS export CL is manager ID that you about it all uses. Like Tom was saying, Manila no longer needs to worry about export management. Implies that it no longer needs to care about the export counter. And it's this manager and a module is what the CA talks internally and does. It's very sense that it assume that I mean that are provided. It doesn't try to add them. So I think we should worry about external. I mean, there. Think of it as a brand new Ganesha server, and all these exports are created through Manila in our case. I think.
Yeah, you're saying there aren't going to be any exports created by some outside agent that's not using this API. It's assuming that the way Manila is interacting with it, it's the way anybody would be interacting with it. I mean, my model for this is it's essentially a black box with an API for Manila. And it's managing the HA, so we don't worry about persisting RADOS objects to do that. It's managing the counters, et cetera. We're just telling it what exports we want it to have. And when we upgrade, we're moving from an old Ganesha cluster to a new Ganesha cluster. We're not sliding objects into it sideways or something like that. We're starting fresh.
Correct. Yeah, thanks for summarizing it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, I think we have a bunch of AIs in this and further discussions to have. Any other comments while we're here for this topic?
Well, and this may simplify the problem we have earlier of when we say, oh, the new CephAtom managed Ganesha doesn't understand our config. A lot of the aspects of our config had to do with these, perhaps some of them at least had to do with these lower level details that we're no longer needing to manage ourselves. So we don't need to talk Ganesha about those. There are other things like maybe some of the settings for the way for the CephFS FSAL or something that we're setting right now that we need to check and see if they're compatible or whether we can just throw them away. We inherited most of those without really understanding them anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. We didn't talk about that piece at all, apart from calling out that the CephAtom deployment will start with no defaults or something, or rather smaller set of sensible defaults. So is that something that I mean, we are going to summarize and share elsewhere, or what do we do with that?
My inclination is to start with the default configuration that they are setting up for Ganesha and FCell and the CephFS FCell, and just go with it. And then if there's some problems, there are bugs. And whether they're fixed by, putting in some old config or something, I don't know, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, clarifying that, I guess I mean, we were not involved with the caching decisions that were made, the caching option decisions that were made. But to preserve that behavior or not is the question that you're asking, right, Norm? You're basically saying
that type of thing. I think we can deal with those issues effectively as details as we go along. If we notice a difference between the old and new caching behavior, then that's a question for Ramana and his team. And they may well explain to us, oh, you have settings from 5 years ago, and we've long moved on from that. Or they may say, oh, yeah, we should take that into account. I just deployed the CephAtom, and I notice I have 2 active MDSs.
oh, nice. Is that by default?
Touching on, I didn't do anything, so I think that's difference in default behavior from what we have right now.
Oh, interesting.
So, we're going to see things like that, and we need some soak time, I think, to work through.
Totally agree with that.
All right.
I have a question. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question regarding the last bit, which is in the pod, regarding it's a bit about the default configuration, but I'm not sure if it's just about the default or if it's something that we need to investigate more into. The very last comment in the pod regarding the recovery backend that would go from to Ados cluster. I'm not sure if we understand how that behaves or supposedly behaves.
What I want to say is that we might want to understand it because we like to understand how Ceph works. But from a Manila standpoint, and Manila as a customer of Ceph in this case, we don't need to understand that.
Yeah, I get it. So we just consume and assume that it's behaving, correctly.
Does that make sense? I mean, this is my simple-minded view of it. It's a black box now that manages its own HA. So you're not persisting something in Rados to enable recovery. We don't need to do that anymore. We need to maintain that state in the vanilla database.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tom. I think from the OpenStack's perspective, it should OpenStack shouldn't worry about how Ganesha, CephADM managed Ganesha makes sure that active-active high availability works. So it internally uses the recovery backend to do it, Rados cluster recovery backend to do it. So that'll be in the config. So that's something that you shouldn't be worried about. So we are starting from scratch, right? So we are going to take down all the NFS servers that were deployed and bring up new ones. So it should be okay. Of course, there's going to be a disruption of NFS service, and that's not ideal. But from OpenStack's perspective, it's just a black box, and if it doesn't work, this HA doesn't work, that's on Ceph and Ganesha working it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah, regarding the cache attributes, caching attributes, that there was the discussion in Ceph mailing list, and so we had 4 or 5 years ago when we had set these attributes, caching attributes. It made sense then. So they weren't, we didn't come up with them without, not like it was made up. We just need to make sure if it still makes sense, and that discussion was in the Ceph mailing list, and I think they have figured it out, what the caching attributes need to be. So that makes sense for both CephFS and Radars Gateway. So that's yeah, we can look into those details further, but Ceph should take care of it. The Ceph community and Ganesha community should take care of it.
Yeah, I've seen discussions on some of the stuff mailing lists lately for possible tuning parameters. If you knew you were going to have lots and lots of little small files and stuff like that. So I could imagine in the future as kind of an enhancement, exposing some of those things to Manila, to an operator. But that's kind of a different, that's an enhancement type thing, not, I think we should just go with the defaults to start with.
Makes sense. And when you're saying it is the current state of affairs, and the futures is when Manila starts deploying Ganesha servers.
Presumably, yeah, because it is
the far future.
Yeah, I mean, it's because changing everything for small, optimized for small files probably wouldn't make sense for the whole cloud.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Anything else?
I have a question. I want to make sure I heard something right about migrating shares. So let's say I'm on the version we have today, and now I want to run these books that if I've created a bunch of shares, or my users have, then service is interrupted, and when it comes back, I have a working Manila service I can use to request new shares. But are you saying that none of the existing exports will be there? I probably misunderstood that. I'm fresh at the new cluster at that point, but as someone who previously created a share and an export for a user, what happens to those? They don't exist on the new system, or is that right?
Not really.
Sorry, go ahead, Gautam.
No, I was just going to say that connects to this stuff about the Ganesha recovery piece. So we've been storing the NFS exports as well as applying them. So and the reason we're doing that is for this active passive recovery itself. So we store that in Rados in a particular object. And right now, Ramana told us yesterday that that place that it's stored is different with the CephAdam deployed Ganesha instances. So that might be something where we need to probably have some tooling that'll move these objects over to the new place. I don't know, Ramana. We should probably.
I'm not.
Yeah, I think when we discussed this, the plan was the Manila driver, when it initializes after the upgrade and we started up, then it replaced the exports, all the exports that are in the Manila database. So when Manila knows that it's switching, what it do recreate
but I have been thinking is a replay on upgrade the efforts in the new form. So we have the old percent mechanism, which we're not going to carry over, but it gives us the information we need in order to do a replay. So they're created in the new NFS server. So we have an old NFS server with an old NFS persistence mechanism that we're going to want to tear down and throw away. But it has the information we need so that we aren't starting entirely with a blank slate in the way John described. We can move past that state to the shares are already there, and we can now set up exports for them. And that's why I put in the possibility. I don't that's with the new with that yesterday. So we could think about whether, and we had the idea that we would allow people to migrate separately from the actual OpenStack upgrade. We'd have some compatibility and allow them to migrate after that. Allowing client in their own time as if we so no or not, but I think it's something we can consider.
Just to summarize, you talked a lot about how, and that's cool. I guess I was just asking the what. Like, I'm a user and I have exports. At the end of this process, I still have them. I don't have to, like, I still have my data and, right?
So we're not expecting the user to allow access over again to recreate exports. That's
okay.
That was kind of the fear behind your question, I think, is really expecting users to have to recreate their exports after an upgrade. And,
right.
And I think the requirement is that we come up with an upgrade process that's not a requirement on in.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I think I wanted to link something in because I've seen CephFS to do the migration. Which is, I think, what we expect from Manila and what probably Ceph in general is interested in doing for customers outside Manila.
This when the CephFS driver starts up in Manila, it's this exports. We would need, if we go that way, we would that hook to create exports in the new NFS cluster using commands, SFAtom commands to do it. Hadn't been done once. Is that making sense?
Audio is skipping a lot for me, Tom. Sorry, I missed part of it.
Yeah, same for me.
Same here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but John, so that link in that change, I think I see the CephNFS create share command. Sorry, create CephFS export, and then which makes me think that this is the task that eventually would migrate pre-existing shares into the newer way. Yeah.
Looks like the steps needed to migrate the old Ganesha to the new format with the CephADM export.
The old shares.
And it is, yeah, the old shares, and it used the new CLI to create a new cluster, which is an object within the Ceph environment, and then the exports.
Yeah, which means that eventually this is a responsibility for Ceph, because again, it's a bit black box.
Yeah, or at least we can talk with the Ceph team and see if there is a plan to provide a simple playbook that migrates the old with the new scenario.
I'm confused now. So are we talking about migrating the export objects now?
Migrating the exports? Yes, I missed the last part.
Oh yeah, export objects. I don't think we, like I was saying, we have to.
Not rather subjects. No, I see that the playbook is doing that too, but it's not what we are using in OpenStack. No, it's only the NFS exports that I was looking into. So it's just somewhere in the submission. Sorry if it's confusing things instead of helping, but in the playbook there are some tasks that will be migrating NFS shares, and others that are also dealing with W export.
Yeah, I need to. I haven't read this one. I look at this, Julie. I don't understand this better, but with discussions with the Manila team is that Manila driver, the CephFS driver, will take care of deleting with recreating the new exports via CephADM CLI. The Ceph NFS CLI, CephFS NFS export create during driver startup, or one of their APIs. So I think we should be okay with that. The circling back to John's question, yeah, so what the client would see, I think client might have to unmount and remount after the migration happens, when the new NFS servers are up and we've recreated these exports. So that's what I was thinking. Does that sound?
Yeah, that part is understood, I think, because of the I mean, we've kind of been speaking about the aspect of disruption from the beginning. The only way is to be able to signal that to the end users. That is something that we would have to write up as an administrator responsibility, that going into this and making these changes, and how we craft them is going to be the meat of this, right? So even if the driver wants to figure out something to do, it needs to be some sort of a configuration change that an administrator gets involved in. So they'll know at that time that it is disruptive. It is disruptive today to change the Ganesha IP address, because Manila will just go ahead and update all of the exports, no matter what sorts, and we don't even know whether the old Ganesha server is running. So this problem kind of sort of exists today, except in this case we know that in cases like TripleO, they're going to move the NFS servers, and we'll have to deal with this thing. So, yep, I guess the disruption is unavoidable.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the question on the disruption will be, can we have clients do them one by one while we maintain some compatibility, or is it going to be a cutover for all of them at once that's initiated by the cloud administrator?
Yep.
I just have a comment regarding the second virtual IP. Regarding deployed Ceph, we have these two approaches to deploy Ceph in Triple O. We talk a lot regarding deployed Ceph, which means deploying Ceph before cloud deployment. This happen with different steps. So we have metal provision at first, then we have networks. There is an additional steps where you can allocate virtual IPs, and then you can deploy Ceph, which means that probably there's at some point this part where we are going to create NFS daemons with CephADM, and we're going to apply the ingress daemon can be moved before the overcloud is actually deployed. This can work, but the constraints that we have here is that we need probably a second VIP virtual IP, a different virtual IP. But this is something that should be applied to fresh deployments, I guess. Not sure if you join.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just going to clarify that this is for greenfield deployments, not the upgrade
Yeah.
scenario.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we were talking about needing a second VIP then.
Yeah, I guess we need to go back to the drawing board on that one. So we'll probably have to sketch out that scenario. The second VIP thing was an easy way because Manila already has that plumbing to expose multiple IPs and stuff and create multiple exports. But yeah, how that works, and especially when we also are changing the APIs to talk to these Ganesha daemons, that's going to be interesting. We'll probably rework that and have another discussion around this. What do you think? It's a great suggestion, and
yeah,
might help.
Yeah, I totally agree that we should look into that. I mean, if we can do this, we're either going to do this during overcloud deployment or before overcloud deployment. And if we can have it before overcloud deployment on day one, then that's a good idea. I think we should consider it.
Yep.
But if we don't want to get into that type of thing right now, that's fine. We'll come back to it later.
Yep, and I suspect we want to definitely deal with it at the driver level, because I mean, when an export is exposed to an end user, they'll want to know which one to use, and what these VIPs are. They'll never understand if we just had exports this thing. But we have a mechanism to send information from the administrator to the end user via export location metadata and stuff. So we'll probably go back to the drawing board, think about that. What do you think, Victoria, Tom?
Yeah, so I guess that we need still to get more feedback on other tools, well, like how they are going to address this if we decide to move, when we move to the actual interface that we're planning to use. So I guess this is the first meeting of several.
Yep.
Triple O is, of course, the best, most important deployment tool. And I'm joking. I'm wearing my red hat. But,
you're not biased.
I don't.
But to the extent to which we can problem in Manila itself and not in the deployment tool with regard to export migration or BIPs and so on, that's more general and better, from an perspective, if we can. So I'm for going back to the drawing board on this, as Gautam says, and thinking about it some more.
Yeah, agree.
Yep, like all things CephFS, this is a multi-community effort. So let's discuss this some more. All right, thank you so much. Is there
Sounds good.
anything else? Any final thoughts? Going once, twice. At, let's thank Victoria and John, Francesco, Giulio, Ramana. Everyone, thank you so much for joining on this talk and presenting this. If you could stay on,